Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. The city's Health and Hospitals Corporation and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development have announced 70 units of new affordable housing to be located in a vacant building on the campus of Jacobi Medical Center for formerly incarcerated people needing ongoing specialty care. The project, called Just Home, will address their needs through intensive on-site social services provided by licensed clinical social workers, dedicated peer workers, and specialists. It also will provide close access to the health services at Jacobi Medical Center. The Fortune Society will act as developer, manager, and social service provider for the project, which will be modeled after their Castle Gardens residence that has been largely successful in West Harlem. While the project has gained support from some officials, including the Bronx DA and the city's public advocate, it has received significant opposition from Bronx Community Board 11 and the people who live in the Morris Park area, and there have been some raucous meetings in which local residents have expressed their displeasure. Tonight we've got representatives from both sides of the issue here so that people of the Bronx can make up their own minds on what ought to be done. So please join me in welcoming the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Fortune Society. It is Stanley Richards. Mr. Richards, nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And the District Manager of Community Board 11. It is Jeremy Warnake. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Warnake.
Thank you.
Let's just start with you, Mr. Richards. What are we doing? What is Fortune Society hoping to do, planning to do, and why?
Well, Fortune Society, let me just start off by saying we've been around for 55 years. Our mission is to support successful reentry and make communities safer. We understand that when you help people rebuild their lives post-incarceration by providing supportive housing, education, employment, substance abuse treatment, communities end up being safer because those people build new lives. I'm an example of that as a formerly incarcerated person. And so this is an opportunity. We were engaged by Health and Hospitals Corporation and HPD to engage in this process to build out an innovative, supportive, permanent housing program. It is called Just Home. The building will have 70 studio units. Its population will be people who have complex medical needs, who happen to be, one, homeless, and happen to be formerly incarcerated, because that's the population we work with. We'll be providing 24-hour residential age security for the buildings. We will provide on-site services, case management, access to medical care. And for the people who will be living there, this is permanent housing, so they have a lease. They will have immediate access to health care, not through the emergency room, but through routine engagement with a healthcare provider, Jacobi Hospital.
Which is on site.
It's on site.
What did you learn, or what does Fortune Society learn from, what is it, Castle Gardens in West Harlem? The way the information has been put out there is that this will be somehow modeled afterwards. What did you learn from that can be applied, and maybe are there differences here that didn't apply in that case?
One of the biggest lessons we learned is how to build a mixed-use, affordable and supportive housing program in a community that when we first got there didn't want us. How do you build and strengthen relationships?
That sounds familiar for what,
yes,
for
it
what
sounds
we're
very
dealing
familiar
with right now, yeah.
And over the last 22 years we've been in that community, we have built a real partnership with the community members, and we've been able to provide supportive, stable housing for men and women who have justice-impacted histories, including community members. So we have 114 units, one for the super, 63 for people with justice histories, and the remaining 50 for general community members. Something similar that we'll have for Just Home in the 70 units.
Mr. Warnake, there's no secret. It's been all over the media. People have seen some of the videos from the meetings. People in that neighborhood, now I realize, let's be fair, the community board itself has not voted yet. Right? At the time that we're recording this, it might happen between now and the time that it's airing. But there is clear opposition to it. Maybe you can articulate what some of that opposition is about.
So the community board hasn't voted yet. We are having a housing committee meeting tonight, which I think...
Let's just say we're recording this Thursday night, Thursday, October 6th. Go ahead.
Tonight, Thursday night, October 6th, we're having, the housing committee of Community Board 11 is meeting. I think that they might make a recommendation that goes to the full board, and the board then ultimately decides. It's just a recommendation though, right? The community board is an advisory body, especially in this role. The only authorities with approval power over the project, I would say, to my knowledge, is the mayor's office, the city council, the HHC board, Health and Hospital Corporation.
It's an advisory vote, but
Yeah.
certainly in terms of measuring the temperature of the community, in general, that's an indication of one indication of what community members think. Well, what's the concern?
So the residents that live in the vicinity of Jacobi here are most concerned, right? There's a concern, there's always with issues or projects like this, or a homeless shelter, for example, there's always concerns about public safety. There's always concern about, sometimes there's concerns about the individuals that would be in the program, like what amenities do they have available to them nearby? I know residents have been particularly interested in the location because, as you showed on the video, there's this big wall there that basically, blocks the Jacobi campus off from the residential side of the neighborhood. And so there was concern that there was talk that the wall is being open. The wall is supposedly not being open. That's like an old rumor that's hopefully dispelled by now.
Well, that's why we're here, to try and tell people the truth. So that's good. That's a good thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there is, I would say, there's a lot of mixed feelings on this. There's people in favor of it. Not everybody's opposed to it, but the most vocal majority is probably, of course, opposed to it.
Right. Among the things that I hear is the public safety issue and even the allocation of resources. They're saying, well, wait a minute, we have homeless people who weren't incarcerated, for example. We have other people who need housing. Why are we giving it to people who are formerly incarcerated, and yet we maybe have other needs? I mean, is that the kind of thing that you hear?
Just one more time, because I have a very thick skull. So one more time for me, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. The whole idea is people were saying, why are they getting this housing when there are other needs for housing? I heard people at some of these meetings talking about, well, why don't we build more community centers or other kinds of facilities? Why are we putting resources into this? I mean, I hear this
of course.
from what we've seen.
We definitely hear this, right? And we're definitely aware of that concern. We understand too the city's needs. There's definitely a housing issue, and then especially for people who are released from prison. But to my knowledge, also this program is not going to entirely. It's an affordable housing aspect to it too, I believe.
I think you can correct us if I'm wrong, but 50 of the apartments would go to formerly incarcerated, and 20 would go to people who need housing, affordable housing.
Which is also a drop, I believe, from the original proposal.
Right.
I think it was originally proposed for 100. But yeah, one reason why we try to have meetings or discussions early on about this is because the rumor mill really gets out of hand. Because when it first started, the rumor is like 300 or something, but yeah, now it's what, 70?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the facts are the facts. But you say try to have meetings. There have been meetings. I mean, I want to put up. We'll put up some quotes. A community resident said this, and it was quoted in the paper. If these people have been released from Rikers Island, are they no longer prisoners? And if they're no longer prisoners, why are you? And this would go to the city and to the Fortune Society in the business of giving them housing. We are all, whether you're Christian or whatever you are, we want to help people, but we want to help people in our own community, and we don't want prior Rikers Island inmates in my community. That was one community resident. And then the vice chair of Bronx Community Board 11, and he's with the Morris Park Community Association, said they keep putting these social experiments in the Bronx. They're putting us in harm's way. I guess I'm expressing, we pulled these out specifically, this is what people are saying. Do you have a sense of what community board members think? Or
Again, I think it's mixed. So I'd say on the board, there are definitely people on both sides of the issue. I know that I don't want to, like you said, we want to get the facts. I mean, there are people that feel that there are people on, I don't know how to best articulate this, but like Al D'Angelo, you're quoting, the
Yes.
vice chair. I mean, some of the things that are being put out there are just, I would say, wrong. Like some people think that Al is in favor of the project,
Who
and
would think that?
I know Mr. Richards here would not think that, but there are definitely.
Well, let me ask you this. He had said that they should defund Health and Hospitals Corporation if this goes through. Goodness gracious. I mean, this is a public agency that serves us with COVID and serves us with all the other facilities all through the Bronx and all through the city. That's a rather stark statement. How did we get from the proposal that we heard from Mr. Richards to there? To where the vice chair of the community board made that statement.
So the first question is, did he make that statement as the vice chair, or did he make that as a statement of the Morris Park community?
Either way, that's the statement he made. Yeah. I'm not going to, I don't know the context, but he did say it. I mean, it's.
Well, I know he would say that context matters, but ultimately, I can't. I don't remember when he said that or.
All right, Mr. Richards, what do you think about some of the things you've heard? The concerns about safety, the concern about saying, well, wait a minute, why are formerly incarcerated getting resources when others, might also deserve? We have many needs in our society. What are your thoughts?
The reality of it is that's a very unfortunate conversation. We tend as a society to try to put people in pockets and to pit each other against one another, when we should be looking at the whole of our community and public safety. As I said, Fortune Society has been around for 55 years. Our work is public safety. When we help people get jobs, when we help people maintain their sobriety, when we provide supportive, affordable housing for people, people tend to build sustainable, strong lives. As a formerly incarcerated man, I was born and raised in Soundview. I cycled in and out of jail, and it wasn't until I went to college when I was in prison that I began to see a way out of the life I thought I was destined for. And so college and prison helped transform my life. And we had a similar conversation in 1994 about why are we providing college and prison when we can't afford college in the community. The answer is we should be able to afford it in the community, and we should be providing it for people who are incarcerated. So this notion that why provide housing for people with justice impacted, and should we be providing housing for veterans, and should we be providing housing for homeless people? Absolutely. The answer is yes to both.
I'm kind of smiling. This is an aside. I once taught a music course at Sing Sing. So I know what it's like to go into a prison. This goes back many, many years. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. What does history show might happen to the people who could be in this project, and if they don't get services? If in other words, people in that community get their way, and the project doesn't happen, what happens to those people?
There's a huge disconnect, right? They end up in the shelter system, and our taxpayer dollars still pay for that housing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't meet their needs, their medical needs, so they're in a situation where they are really in survival, or they end up using our medical resources when their medical condition doesn't necessarily necessitate that, if they had affordable, safe housing where they can have visiting nurse services and other access to medical care. So as a society, we end up paying for it. We just pay for it differently.
Do they end up on the street?
Absolutely. End up on the street.
So this would get into the safety issue, and you, of course, deal with all the safety issues and everything else as the district manager of the community board. If we don't do this, now we can't say those individuals might end up being on the street of, Morris Park Avenue. I don't know that, but they will be out there. Does that make you or some of the community board members or some of the community members say, well, you know what, maybe we ought to do this? Because you're almost trading one for the other.
Again, the board members are mixed, right? As far as I know, I mean.
And we'll see how that vote falls.
Yeah. We'll see how that vote falls. I mean, you know, having served in the military, I have an idea of how institutions work. A lot of people make comparisons between the prison system and the military. So I understand, I think a lot of our members understand that these people have needs and services. I think, you know, there's always the concern of how's it going to play out? Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a bad apple, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's what people get at.
We'll address that security thing in a moment. Does every community, and this I'm sure comes up in you and your dialogue with community board members all the time, does every community have a responsibility to participate in the process of helping to alleviate the city's burgeoning homeless problem?
Yeah, I think so.
So do you, the community board, or do you hear from others in the community who say, well, this isn't the right spot, we're concerned about our property values and all that other stuff, we would rather put it here? Is there a place that you or the community board would volunteer and say, you know what, let's do that here instead of here?
Well, yeah, so I think everybody, wherever you go for any type of project, you're going to find people in opposition, right? You're always going to find that.
Well, of course.
I mean, you know, some people don't like maybe highlighting this fact, but we've done that with homeless shelters, right? We've helped site other locations. I think the problem with,
although there was one that was turned down as a result
altogether.
of significant community opposition.
So I mean, I think in some ways this follows from that, right? People maybe saw that as a model, you know, kind of show up and.
So they think that this would be the same thing.
A lot of people, because this is the first of its kind, to my knowledge, right here in Jacobi.
Right. I mean,
Population.
Mr. Richards could do that.
The medically compromised in New York City, there is a network of supportive housing programs that provide supportive housing to people who have medical, mental health, substance use, and homeless issues. But this one focused specifically on people with serious medical issues, not serious enough to warrant hospice or kind of intensive care, but just serious enough to say that if they go to the shelter, their ability to survive in the shelter goes down dramatically. And with supportive housing could give them an opportunity to live a fruitful life.
Can you respond to the question of keeping people safe and say, well, wait a minute, some of these people, now that we realize that they are not, many of them are pre-trial, so that you know, they're not actually criminals, although that's been the accusation that's out there. But can you ensure, to some degree, security, so that people won't leave there and then go commit a crime or rob a house or do something even worse?
Here's what I can tell you. Over our 55 years, we have been providing services to help people rebuild their lives. In Castle Gardens, specifically, we opened that up in 2010. Since 2010, 88% of the tenants who live there have lived there between 3 and 10 years. So we know providing supportive housing gives people an opportunity to build a new life. Mm-hmm. And it speaks to how people see themselves and how they integrate into the community. And
there is screening going to happen before people go in there. You know, we're having a civil dialogue here, and there may be agreement or disagreement or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's a respectful dialogue. We respect everybody's opinion. Yes. I want to show you a clip, and you know about this meeting that happened just a week ago. Let's show a clip of what happened. This is a community resident shot this video. Raised my eyebrows. Let's take a look.
Every time you open your mouth, it's killing you, making a fool of yourself, shouting experience.
I support this project because it helps gravely ill sick people. I support this project because it helps gravely sick people, and they save a homeless right up to 1%. Do they remain in jail, sick, and possibly dying? Is this, or in the street, could this be a problem? Unless let me finish, that's the need.
Diana Finch is ready to speak.
I'm in favor of just home.
All right, Mr. Mr. Warnake, how did we get from this civil dialogue, which maybe it's a good project, maybe it's not. I mean, others will decide that's certainly not me or BronxNet Television. How do we get from this to that? I mean, it just is completely out of hand.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it seems like in some ways, society as a whole has become this way in recent years. Very divisive, right? How do we get back to more civil discourse and dialogue? With the public hearing, I think there are a few things that, in hindsight, we could have done differently or better.
Well, I think certainly not allowing people to act out. I mean, this is something that community boards and people running hearings do all the time.
Yeah, this was held at Jacobi Medical Center, and Jacobi held at Jacobi, which we don't. It's very rare that we've met there. Mm-hmm. So we use their microphone system when we have full board meetings. Everybody knows I have the controls. You're talking too long, I turn off your mic. I didn't have that power. Right. Even then, I think it would have been difficult, right?
Well, certainly the people, it looked and behaved like a mob scene. I know the Bronx Times just put out a story about it, and it's really, frankly, difficult to read. Here's just a suggestion. There were people who accosted people, went up to somebody and finger in the face, used the F word. Yeah. One gentleman is caught on camera. I mean, we didn't want to show all this. We certainly didn't want to, BronxNet has some community standards. We didn't want to show all the bad language that was used. But they told somebody, where do you live? I want to bring a gift to your home, and then use. I mean, should those people be allowed? Should the community board identify those people and not permit them into community board meetings in the future? I know if I was in the community board, I would not permit that. That is just absolutely not acceptable.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before. This is not the first time we've gone through this. I mean, so Harriet at the community board office, who's still works for us and has been working for us since 1980, once upon a time she was told American citizen, she was told to go back to Russia where she came from. I mean, unfortunately it's in some ways it's always been here. We've always had these contentious meetings. But the difference is the camera recording, which a lot of people took issue with, but they're allowed to do it.
Anybody could, of course they can. Anybody could sit there with a cell phone and record all the time.
And you know, I got to tell you, I was at that meeting. It was horrible. But here's the hope I have. The hope I have is that what those loud voices were shouting, garbage, we don't want garbage in our borough.
They called them animals.
Animals. Like, I'm hoping the good voices of good people who see you and who see me and who see our diversity, not as something to run from and be afraid of, but something to embrace. I'm hoping that more good voices step up and say, what we've heard and witnessed at that community meeting is absolutely unacceptable.
We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to ask you very quickly. This guy, Roderick Compass, who spoke at length at that meeting, as a matter of fact, talked about how one of your former clients created havoc. Did you want to just get a chance to respond to that?
Yes, absolutely. He spewed a whole bunch of really
It
off
was
the
pretty
wall.
striking, yeah.
It was some off the wall stuff. I mean, he
Some
talked
of it,
about
printed in the Real Deal,
Congressman Meeks and Senator Schumer sort of setting his wife up to be sexually assaulted. It was like some off the wall stuff that he was talking. But here's the facts. We rented an apartment from Mr. Compass. One of our tenants damaged his apartment. We moved to evict that tenant. We finally got that tenant evicted. The tenant left in January. We have offered repeatedly to repair the damages that were caused by that tenant. And in addition, we have continued to pay Mr. Compass rent since we started the eviction process and since the person has left his property.
So you believe that this is not an example of how fortune society...
It's absolutely not an example.
Mr. Warnake, we'll give you the final word here. What's next? And I guess, number one, how do we tamp down the community tenor? I mean, I gave you one suggestion there. And what's next on this project or other projects that come up so we don't have a repeat of what was happened at this meeting and, frankly, other meetings prior?
So this is a public hearing we had, right? The whole point, everybody seems to fail to understand that the point of a community board public hearing is for the community board to hear from the public. So Well, Mr. Richards was there. He didn't have to be. You know, we appreciated him being there. Obviously, it was not easy for him to be there. But ultimately, it's not about him. It's about hearing. It's for the community board members to hear from the public. Too many people don't understand that. So going forward, I really would hope people understand it's really just for the community board members to hear from the public. It's not for him to answer a bunch of questions, which frankly, I don't think anybody really wants him to answer.
Well, we
right?
provided that opportunity here this evening. Well, I want to thank you both, Stanley Richards from Fortune Society, Jeremy Warnake from Community Board 11. I actually want to do a little editorial just based on where I sit. I'm not going to weigh in on this project. We'll let the process will go. But my point is that I see communities all the time, all over the Bronx that have these kinds of issues. People in the South Bronx have a right to be really upset over the gentrification in their communities. You drive down, on the Deegan or on the Bruckner, and you've got a whole changing landscape that are dislodging and are going to displace people. They have a right to be upset. There have been protests, but it's never, devolved into something like that. The Northwest Bronx, there's a homeless facility being proposed by an organization that appears to be less than reputable. There have been protests, there have been hearings. It never devolved into anything like that. There's a facility further down on Broadway in 235th Street where there was a family shelter that was completely opposed by the community, and there was, again, protests and hearings and everything else. And what happened was they built that facility. People can go by there all the time. And guess what? It turned out to be a wonderful facility. And in fact, the people who welcomed them won an award for doing just that, for saying, you know what, we can make this happen. Now, I'm not saying this is the right place or the right facility and that's going to happen there, but I'm just hoping that the next time, whether it's the Community Board 11, Community Board 6, Community Board, whatever it is, if they want to have a hearing or call me. Call BronxNet Television. We can do a civil discussion. We can provide real information and not have it devolve so that people are doing the worst kinds of things. So anyway, right? Good idea. You like the idea? Yeah, I just feel like we need to just have some civility here and have real discussions. Things hurt and things are bad in the Bronx, and they put facilities in the Bronx that nobody wants, right?
That's right.
Thank you so much, Stanley Richards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy Warnake. And we always thank our producers, Rebecca Hemick and Stephen Powell. Boy, you don't know what a great job that they do, and they do it every week. Our director is Benaiah War. He manages the cast of Thousands in the Room. And we'll see you next week. Good night.